Full disclaimer before we get started, I want to personally thank all of you guys so much for helping me make it this far, though. I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't for the likes of any of you guys, because honestly, I didn't think I would make it this far, and by the time I'm making this recording, if it seems like I was jinxing it a bit, though, it's because I was still recording an intro before this whole thing started out, though. And if it seems like I was saying thank you again, though, there's a reason. I record pretty weirdly when it comes to this, though, but nonetheless, we're still here, and I'm still here, even with my health issues being a bit sporadic at times, though. But nonetheless, it's time for me to talk about my favorite movie of all time. So, strap yourselves in, grab some popcorn, and get whatever drink you get your hands on, and let's get started. The following video is... Wait, hold on a sec. Let me check something. Oh, wow. Today's Mother's Day. I can't believe we're here, though. I don't know what's scarier. The fact that it's Mother's Day or the fact that it's almost... The fact of how it's May. It's May already, though. Oh my god. I mean, I know it's not even close to the middle of the year, but goddamn has this year been... Well, rocky for me. Man, now that I say that out loud, I think of my dog. But either way, I'm still here, and I want to thank you all so much for being with me this far, though. Seriously, close to the 900 range. I didn't think I could make it this far on my channel, but here we are. Anyways, let's get started on what I want to tell you guys a story. Now, I want to let you all know, though, that when I say that I want to talk about my favorite movie out there, I really mean it. This isn't just my favorite movie out there, period. It's my favorite movie entirely out of anything you could ever name across from the top of your head, though. But as such, which movie is it? Did it come from Disney? Did it come from Pixar? Or maybe it came from Studio Ghibli? None of the above. Although, admittedly, I can definitely assure you that none of these here companies came from the movie we're talking about today. But instead, we're going to talk about Don Bluth. For those who don't know, which I don't blame you because I don't know how old my audience is, but I know most of them are younger than me, so let's go with that. Don Bluth is actually known for having a lot of movies. He used to be a former animator for Disney before he went out on his own, though. But honestly, looking back on some of these movies, even for now, I remember watching a chunk full of these movies on VHS at the time. All Dogs Go to Heaven, The Land Before Times, and American Tail. But honestly, as time went on, though, I started realizing that a lot of these movies are still movies I still look even to this day. Even if some of his movies are flawed, I still think they're still great nonetheless when it comes to movies that are mediocre, though. Compared to the bad ones, which I will get to Troll in Central Park because there's a lot to pick apart with that one, though. Needless to say, I wanted to talk about one of his movies that still got to me over this time, though, and something along the lines of the movie that made it the worst for my experience, though. I wouldn't say it's the worst movie in its entirety for my sake, but if I had to pick a worst movie that I personally hate, then I'm personally gonna have to wait until I do that kind of video. I don't know when it will be, but needless to say, I'm not focusing on that. But we're not here to focus on those, though, even though it was during the time, though. Yeah, here's the thing about me. I didn't grow up with a lot of TV. Even if I did watch some of these movies, they were either on VHS or they were on cable-free channel networks. So I had no other choice but to watch them as time went on, though. But honestly, I didn't have much of a childhood anyway, due to a lot of things. Getting a job, getting essayed before then, and so much and so forth. Not going to go into detail of that other one I just mentioned, but I will tell you it's still pretty scary when thinking about it. Hell, that's why I always say I need to take a break every now and then, though. But you're probably all thinking, what's my favorite animated movie from Don Bluth? Or in this case, my favorite animated movie out there. But you're probably thinking to yourself, what's your favorite movie, though? Is it An American Tail? All Dogs Go to Heaven? Or The Land Before Time? Maybe even the weaker movies to show a little guilty pleasure. No, I'm not talking about any of those. In this case, my favorite movie from his collection, in fact, it's my favorite anime movie of all time, would have to be from The Secret of NIMH. The Secret of NIMH was based on the children's novel book called Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH. And I hope my audio can clearly tell you guys if I'm saying Mrs. Frisby right, because when they did the movie, though, it was quite the production itself, though. The movie itself was going on and on about production, but needless to say, while it was a success in the box office, though, it actually became a cult classic in its own day and age. And for those who actually have seen it, still enjoy it. And honestly, I can definitely see why that is, though, including myself, really. But we're gonna delve into why I love The Secret of NIMH so much and why it's possibly my favorite movie of all time, like more than ever before. And you don't have to worry, guys, because I'm not gonna show any clips or anything due to my own channel getting, well, monetized or something. But honestly, let's talk about the movie itself, though. The movie itself is about a young widowed mouse by the name of Mrs. Brisby, who seems to love her family very much. And as you can tell, though, her family seems to have things going for her until something. See, one of her kids, Timothy, is pretty sick, diagnosed with pneumonia, and Mrs. Brisby is really worried about her child's own illness getting worse, though. Along with her kids, though, she's doing everything she can in order to help them out, though. Needless to say, though, when her kids and her have their own time, though, they have no other choice but to move away from the plow. The plow itself is also pretty dangerous, which means moving day is almost there, though. Mrs. Brisby, in her own timidity, has to do whatever she can in order to make sure that the family doesn't get crushed by the plow, even if they have to go through forces to move away from it. She has yet to see the great owl, who will give her directions about where to go to, and if they want to move away from the plow before the farm. And then she has to go over to see the rats in order to help ask if in order to see if they can help her move her house away from the plow before it gets worse from there, though. And finally, she has to Nicodemus in order to see how her husband died, even though that's how things gonna go, though, and learns more about the terrible cruelty of NIMH. As time goes on, though, Mrs. Brisby learns her journey has yet to accomplish to go through her timidity while still trying to be brave in the process, though. Yeah, I know I keep stumbling upon this here, though, but like I said, my editing is really shit when it comes right down to it. But all of what I told you so far is basically how the premise goes, though. It's basically telling us that Mrs. Brisby has yet a lot to conquer, even if it goes through her fears, though. And honestly, when it comes to a movie like this, you would expect a movie like, say, Mrs. Brisby to go through her timidity and she just stays that way. But this is actually one of the rare cases where we see a very shy character overcome some of her fears along the way. But the brilliant part about all of this is that while I admit that Mrs. Brisby is not the bravest character out there, you do see her timid in the movie, though. I'm not sure if I should say too much about this movie because there's a lot to unpack here, but I'll just go over it briefly so you guys don't have to worry about spoilers. As such, though, let's talk about Mrs. Brisby herself. The thing about Mrs. Brisby is that, unlike a lot of characters I've come across while I admit the cowardly character is nothing new, especially the shy ones out there, I think it's safe to say that she's actually one of the few rare cases where, despite being very shy, though, you do see her timid a lot. And I do mean timid because, needless to say, she is not used to this world around her, though. She's a very small mouse, and she doesn't know what else to do other than she has to go and push herself in order to see what they can do in order to prevent the plow from coming to her own house, though. And when moving day arrives, though, it's pretty intense when think about it though. And I love that in a character though. Not just the fact that she gets braver as time goes on though, but because you do see her as one of those characters that as time goes on though, and you do see her go ahead and just push herself to it though. I know some people don't like it when the characters push themselves into doing something, but this is actually one of the few rare cases where I have to admit though, for someone like Mrs. Brisby to understand that she has no other choice but to do it, considering her husband's not here. And trust me, I kind of will say her husband and said death about what happens there, so I guess you could say there's going to be spoilers a little bit though, but I'm not going to go into too much detail of it though. This movie isn't too depressing. It does have its uplifting moments, but like I said, this movie is dark. I mean, hell, even if you do see her struggling, like she's going through obstacle courses as time goes on, though, she still pushes herself to go through it, though. And I think that's the mark of a beautiful way of developing a character, though. While that she is timid, though, Mrs. Brisby does want to do whatever she can in order for her and her family to move away from the plow and get the rest to help her out, though. As time goes on, though, you do get to see how things work out though and see how she's able to do it though. I know some people may think I'm a little too much on the coward character when I say this, but I kind of don't like to see coward characters just be cowardly and not do anything to show a bit of boldness here and there. I mean, I'm not saying you have to make them brave if you don't want to, though. If you want to make them like say Piglet from Winnie the Pooh, or maybe Courage from Cowardly the Cowardly Dog. But aside from that, though, I'm not saying that the brave character who starts out very scared is nothing new. But as what one has said before me, and I'll say this, we're only brave because we do the things that we are afraid of. And honestly, it's still true though. I mean, yeah, some people could say you still need to stand up for yourself at obstacle courses along the way though. And the fact that so many people keep pushing others like this, saying that, oh, you'll never be brave, is just disgusting to me. I mean, I go through anxiety myself. I know what this shit's like. But even if I do act brave from time to time, though, again, I only act this way to be brave so no one could get hurt. Seriously, why the hell do you think I say I'd rather see myself get hurt rather than watching others hurt right in front of me? Anyone who's close to me, whether it's a friend, a family member, or anyone that I know, I don't want anyone to get hurt. And that's why I always try to step in line to say that I don't want anyone to do anything to hurt other people. But I also want to point out, though, that this was based on a book, though. So, yeah, let's talk about that for a sec, though. The thing is, though, I didn't even read the book, but when doing research on this, there were some things that they cut out, though, which I won't get into, though. But there are some things that they did do in here that they didn't do in the movie in itself, though. For example, when I said that Mrs. Brisby went to the owl, the one thing they didn't do in the movie is that in the movie the owl thanked, or in this case Mrs. Brisby thanked for about where to go though. Unfortunately they don't do that in the movie, and I feel kind of down about it, but I get that this was a limited time run, so maybe they couldn't do too much of it though. But even so, you think they would have at least thanked them though. Or how about say the villain of this year? You would think that the NIMH itself would be the main conflict of this, but no. For some reason, they decided to change it up by giving Jenner, one of the characters in the book, to make him the villain. In case you guys don't know, Jenner was not a villain. He was mostly there to help Justin, one of the rats, or in this case, the leader of the rats, in order to get rid of the problems out there in the opening, to show Mrs. Brisby that they can help stop them anyways, though. I know some people are going to say that villains bring conflict for the story, but I think it's safe to say I need to give a little writing tip here, though. I mean, it's a good thing I call myself a flamingo writer, because honestly, this needs to be said, though. I know some people are going to think that I'm a little too much on this part, but hear me out, because this does go someplace. When there's a conflict in the story, a lot of people assume that villains are the only ones that could bring conflict to the story, because that's how it works. Now, I'm not saying that you can't do a villain for your story. Of course you can. But the problem I see here is that there's just one little problem I have with it. I'm not here to tell you that you can't have a villain to cause conflict, because honestly, that can be the set of the main source of it, though. But honestly, in this case, even if they do make Jenner into a villain, and, well, Justin has always been the good guy, even in the books, though, I think it's safe to say, hey, though, this kind of feels a bit unbalanced in some places in my mind. On one hand, I can tell you that having a villain in your story can work if you really want to cause conflict, but on the other hand, you don't always need a villain to cause a conflict, guys. Even if you do watch the movie for yourself and have read the book, unlike me, but I had to do research on it though, you kind of have to ask yourself why they made Jenner into a villain though. I'm guessing you could make the argument that they wanted to do whatever they can to cause conflict, though, and something like that. But the NIM itself was already a conflict, even if it itself, though. But that's just a little minor complaint. If anything, the movie itself is still pretty damn great. And like this movie, guys, really touched me. From its animation to the atmosphere to the way your movie sounds like you really want to see Mrs. Brisby succeed. There are tons of stuff I could mention here, and I don't think I want to go into spoilers about how I get into it though. But needless to say, it's still one that really caught my attention though. But you're probably asking yourself though, what is NIM? What is the conflict of this year though? Well, I don't want to spoil too much about what NIM is, because I have a feeling I'm probably going to piss someone off if they haven't seen this movie already. But needless to say, what you need to know about NIM is that it's something that, not to say an institutional thing though, but it is something that go with what they do with these animals. I'm not going to show you any clips of it because honestly, I can't do any clips, and what's more, I don't want to show any pictures since I'm probably going to make someone scared in the audience. But I'll just tell you with my commentary with my OC in front. So here it goes. See, NIM itself is really something that actually does something to kill animals or something like that. So, animal cruelty, for kids. Wow, now that I quote the Nostalgia Critic, I feel like I'm quoting him now, though. Well, regardless of that, that's what I think. But yeah, apparently this here NIM is something that they use to do whatever they can for not just any animals, but rats necessarily, though. And all that, for all the rats to escape, would have to come from Jonathan. Yes. No, not Mr. Enter Jonathan. And honestly, Jonathan seems like a character that, while he's not really in the movie, we do get to see a glimpse shot of him, though, when Nicodemus does explain NIM, though. But my only gripe with it, though, when it comes to the NIM, a lot of people suspect that they should have explained it a lot more, though. I know this movie was an hour and a half long, and they probably didn't have that much to do so, especially at the time, but I feel kind of bad they didn't even go into detail of what happened, though. And speaking of Jonathan, though, you're probably asking yourself, though, when it comes to being a Mrs. Brisby, I did say she was a widow earlier, so you might be asking yourself, whatever happened to Jonathan? Like, how did he get killed or something? Well, strap yourselves in, folks, because what I'm about to tell you is probably gonna make you feel like either terrified or crying. And honestly, there's no other way of describing it. Yeah, I'm putting music in the background so you can understand it a little more, so here it goes. When Jonathan was trying to, say, the rats in him, at the time though, he was going to drug the farmer's cat, Dragon. And yes, I will show you a glimpse of Dragon and Jeremy in a bit though, so hold your breath for a little bit though. But as time goes on though, when Jonathan was just trying to drug the farmer's cat after doing so much so of this though, this is what killed Jonathan. And honestly, Mrs. Brisby still grieves in the movie after losing her husband. And you know what? Who could blame her? No, really, who could blame her through this situation? I mean, it's not every day you hear a lot of the spouses that died, but am I the one who feels like this is one of the first, or maybe the few times we see an actual spouse die? Because honestly though, I don't mean spouse as in just a spouse. I mean, like, say, a husband. A lot of media always say that the mother died, or maybe the mother's not part of the story, or sometimes they'll say the mother's wicked and they couldn't do anything to prevent that. Yeah, there are good mothers in media beforehand, I will say that, but this is one of the few rare cases where we see that a husband who's died, because Jonathan seems like the kind of guy that he really does love Mrs. Brisby, and the same goes for Mrs. Brisby in return, though. Ever since I started watching this movie, I saw her grieve every time, though. And you know what? I don't really blame her one bit, though. Here's the thing about The Secret of NIMH. In theory, when it comes to having Mrs. Brisby grieve over her husband, I know some people are gonna say it's really a sign of that anyways, though. But even if I don't have a dead spouse or partner right now, I still do see where Mrs. Brisby is coming from, though. Because guess what? 3 years prior from this movie, when I started watching it around 12 or 13, I didn't know what's it like to go through a loss now. I mean, yeah, I lost both my pops and my dad, but honestly, when I see Mrs. Brisby grieving over her dead husband, I feel like grieving over my dad, though. But honestly, it was one sign where I couldn't even get into it, though. And the fact that so many people always say we have to suck it up every time something like this just really disgusts me. I mean, how much of a cold-hearted person do you have to be to say you have to have the person to suck it up when someone dies? I mean, granted, I had this happen to me before, but I'll get to that in my final thoughts, though. But you think someone would at least say, at the very least, I'm sorry for your loss. It doesn't have to be too deep or anything, but at least try to not be so cold about it, guys. But Dragon is a beast when it comes to having a cat, though. I mean, seriously, look at this guy. If you don't find him terrifying, well, either you are really used to cats that are both cute and terrifying, or maybe I'm in Mrs. Brisby's position when it comes to that. Seriously, this young little mouse is scared of this cat, who, I won't lie, is pretty scary when you think about it, though. The one eye, the ferocious teeth, and needless to say, it really does show that what happens, though. And the fact that so many people seem to overlook this cat really baffles me at times, though. I mean, yeah, cats can be cute, but you think of this cat for a second and say that. Even some of my friends who are cat people, and while I do like cats myself, although I have a dog, though, I still think that cat looks really terrifying. It looks like something that he would make me out of chicken or something like that. Now, he's not an anthropomorphic cat, I'll say that. He's really more of a house cat, if anything, but I still have yet to say. It really does paint a picture of how this cat really ate Jonathan, though. I mean, seriously, this guy really killed Jonathan, and I know that Mrs. Brisby wasn't around to see it, although it does imply that she didn't see it. She only got the news that he got killed, though. But even with that said, however, though, that's still horrifying. I mean, a cat like this eating a mouse. And now none of you guys can complain about the Great Mouse Detective. What happens when Fifi gets eaten, huh? For a character like Jeremy, I don't know if it's just me, but I personally don't really see why a lot of people hate this guy. I mean, yeah, he's a black crow, which reminds me of Dumbo all over again. And yes, before you ask, I think of Dumbo every time I think of black crows and Jeremy. But honestly, Jeremy is actually the light-hearted comic relief in this year movie. I know what you're thinking. He's a comic relief, and comic reliefs don't do anything except bring people laughs whether they're hit or misses. Now, I will say for comic relief characters, I think it's safe to say for something that's as dark as The Secret NIMH can be, there has to be a bit of balance between those two. Like I said to someone before then, it's best if you balance between those two aspects, if anything to judge by, though. And need I remind you, a lot of people always find him annoying. Like they always say, oh, he's really known to be the comic relief, which sets the mood off for the dark tone of the movie, and needless to say, it's all that bullshit and all that other stuff. I know I keep going back to saying needless to say and all that stuff, but can I just ask you guys one question? Would you rather have the movie too dark for its own good, though? There has to be some sort of balance in those lighthearted movies. He's with dark aspects here and there, but when it comes to dark movies, though, I don't seem to see where's the problem when they put light stuff here and there, though. I guess what I'm trying to say is that Jeremy does bring a few laughs here and there, though. Yeah, he's not really one of those characters that you want to see as the main focus of the movie, even if he is one that's trying to find Mrs. Right and so on and so forth, though. But even with that said, however, what's wrong with having a bit of lightheartedness here and there, though? Like, seriously, I'm being dead serious when I ask this question. A lot of people always say that a little lightheartedness hurts the mood of the movie when it comes to dark aspects. Well, either you probably don't watch a lot of dark stuff that have little light moments here and there, or you probably watch a lot more lighthearted moments where they have the dark stuff, though. There has to be a bit of tension. There has to be a bit of flavor of sugar in that dark aspect, because if not, it's gonna go too sugary sweet or too sour for its own good, though. And if you think I'm really going through with this as much as it is, I'm not. I still think this movie did pretty well with Jeremy. And that's the thing about the movie, though. A lot of these characters don't overstay their welcome. The one character we're supposed to focus on, and one that we actually do get more into, is Miss. When the movie focuses on Mrs. Brisby, you do want to see her succeed. You want her to make sure that her kids are safe and everything. You don't want them to struggle or anything like that along the long side. Even if she does have her moments where she does smile, she's still determined to do whatever she can, though. For a small little mouse, think about that first. In a second, though, imagine yourself in the mouse's position, where everything around you is much bigger and a lot much scarier than what most could ever hoped it would have, though. I mean, it's not every day you see something like this, though. And honestly, in the 1980s, I'm starting to notice that even as someone who wasn't a 80s kid, I think it's safe to say they had a lot of dark movies during that time. I mean, think about it. A lot of the movies that didn't come from Disney were really stiffing up their competition. I can only think of a few at the top of my head that come to mind when it comes to 80s movies that aren't Disney related, so I guess you could say there's also the fact they had The Dark Crystal, another dark movie, The Black Cauldron, which was Disney's most expensive flop, they said. Yeah, I think Mars needs to have a word with you guys. And there's also some Ghibli movies, like, say, Kiki's Delivery Service, which wasn't a dark movie, but it did get intense near the climax of the movie. The Castle in the Sky movie, which I'm not gonna say too much of, because I have a feeling someone who's watching this video is gonna say, don't you dare spoil it. And other movies and such, though. I guess what I'm trying to say is that this was during a time when, while Disney still was making movies, there were still movies that were made by other companies as well, though. And The Secret of NIMH is one of those movies I still go back to again and again. But you know, there is one question that, before anything though, has been sticking out of my head since I started making this video. Why is The Secret of NIMH my favorite animated movie out there? Aside from the beautiful animation, the intense atmosphere, and so much of the story writing. I mean, yeah, it is where I got my dark writings from, but there's a little more to this backstory, so buckle up. I think it's because back then, when I was a kid, I was really watching a lot of stuff at the time, yes, but around 12 or 13, that's where my childhood days were just fading away faster than I could ever say, though. And I know what you're thinking. You're still a kid when you're a teenager. Yes, I know that, but hear me out for a sec. When I was a teenager, I was not able to watch TV, and by that time I was starting to watch a little more of my own internet access, because this is where I was starting to notice a lot of stuff on the internet. Yeah, I was not only around 12 or 13 when I started watching this movie, but before then, there was a little more to it though. So here's what I mean by that. When I was 12 years old, I was going through a phase at myself. I was watching a lot of 80s stuff. I was watching stuff that I didn't grow up with that were before my 12 to teenage years, though. And needless to say, though, I didn't really have that much going for it, though. And this was during the time when, at 12 years old, I was starting to date with my first relationship. My boyfriend. My boyfriend and I were having a lot of things going for ourselves, though. We hung out together. We started going to eat together. We had dinner together. And I used to go over to his house every now and then to play video games with him, and sometimes go out to eat with him as well, though. And honestly, it was pretty beautiful as time goes on, though. When it comes right down to it, though, I know what you're thinking. What the hell does this have to do with The Secret of NIMH in itself? Well, hear me out a little bit more, because this does go someplace why I watched this movie and why it's my favorite movie. See, when I was around 12 years old, my ex-boyfriend next thing was to get a job. And while yes, the next thing to get a job is something that I don't think anyone wanted to hear me say. I mean, let's be honest though, 12 years old is way too young to get a job as is. But this was during the time when I was watching my first nephew. My first nephew was one at the time though, 1 year specifically. And I wanted to focus more on how to actually learn how to babysit, considering that, hey, I might as well do so already though. I did watch other kids around the time, but around summertime is where things got a little more than that though. I hung out with my boyfriend, yes, but after I was done hanging out with my boyfriend and dating him and all stuff, though, I did have times where I had to babysit. But this is where things go downhill though. See, in case it wasn't clear though, I do snap at times. I'm not ashamed to admit that. And when I do snap, I don't want to show it to not just you guys, but anyone out there anyways though. It's really tough to say this though, but when I was starting to date my boyfriend at the time, I did say to him I was free for him whenever he wanted me to come over to play video games with him. I know some people could ask why doesn't he come over to my place instead of me going to his place, but that's because my place was, well, at the time it was when my first nephew and my first older sister and my quote-unquote older stepbrother at the time, not stepbrother, my first his brother-in-law, there were some things I didn't want to get into though. And honestly, I don't think my first nephew would have liked strangers around though. He did meet my first nephew, but my first nephew was kind of scared, so it's understandable why he would think that. But when I started telling my boyfriend that how much I love hanging out with him and stuff like that, and we wanted to do more with each other, things went pretty south pretty quickly. It was around 7th grade when, I can't remember which month it was. I can't exactly remember if it was September or October, but I do know it was during the time of the beginning of a new school year. But when I got the news that he was going to break up with me because he thought I wasn't having enough time as it is though, he just went to say I was having no time for him, when I specifically said I did have time for him whenever he wanted me to. But no, he didn't want to hang out with me because he thought, hey, you have a job now, so you're not free. I did say to him I was free for him when I had the chance, considering this was before I had full-time, and yes, I know for a fact that full-time and part-time are really more of a jumbled mess when it comes to my schedule. But other than that though, yeah, apparently this was during the time when I wanted to hang out with him more, but he didn't want me to hang out with him. He said to me, I'm gonna have to let you go. And when I got the news he was gonna break up with me after he said he was gonna talk to me in the hallway what's happening though, I'm gonna say this right here and now, I didn't cry like some people think, oh, this is what girls do, they'll just cry. And yeah, I suppose boys don't cry, huh? I've met plenty of boys who cry, guys, so shut up. But when I got the news he broke up with me, I was pissed. I snapped at people. I said this to one of my friends on Instagram. I didn't know my own strength at the time. Now when I was doing this here breaking up thing with him, and by the time I started snapping, I was pretty much more of an outcast, and I didn't know what to do aside from my writings. I did write back then, but when I started seeing The Secret of NIMH on that cable-free network, I started saying my troubles were almost all gone. And you know what? I still think of this movie even to this day. It helped me with one part of my life. Yeah, I say one part of my life because personally, I still feel as broken as a fucking broken doll at times though. That being said, however, The Secret of NIMH is what helped me. If anyone's allowed to like, or in this case, love one favorite movie that they still love that helped them with one part of their life, then let me have The Secret of NIMH. It's not a Ghibli movie, it's not a Pixar movie, and it sure as hell ain't a Disney movie, even if there is a former Disney animator out there. But The Secret of NIMH is what helped me through my time though. And it resonated with me on a personal level. Not just in terms of writing, not just in terms of how it got me through my first relationship with my boyfriend before I hook up with my girlfriend, but even with that said, I still think about this movie every now and then. And you know what? I don't think the price was that bad when birthing it though. Again, I didn't grow up with a lot of TV, but when I started seeing a network where they had a lot of non-Disney movies, I can't exactly tell you how many non-Disney movies there were, but I can tell you they were just non-Disney related. And the fact that this movie stuck with me to this day really still paints a picture of why I still love this movie. You could argue that this could be a cheap-ass way to show how this movie affected in my life to do my writings, but I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't for this here movie in particular though. The Secret of NIMH is a brilliant movie. I wouldn't know how many people watched it, considering there are a bunch of people who have talked about it before me, and I'm pretty sure that watching this video may cause a lot of people to say, wow, you really have a way of doing your ratings if this is how you treat it though. But I don't want to end off on a dour note. I want to at least say a few things first before we go off though. First, I want to say to you guys, I feel for how much support I've gotten over the past year, especially when I started doing these videos. I probably wouldn't have made it this far to begin with. I would have done videos beforehand, like say when I wanted to do my channel, but I didn't have motivation to do so, and even if I did do it, it wouldn't cause any more though. Sadly though, I know I'm going to go on a dour note for a bit of a tangent, so hear me out for a sec. When I watched The Secret of NIMH, now that I think about it, this also came around 3 years before something else, my dad's death. And when I heard the news that my dad died, I think of The Secret of NIMH again, because around my teenage years, I wanted to hang out with my dad a lot more than I thought I would have. He took me shopping, he gave me some note journals and pads and stuff like that to write on, and also he always said to me I could always replace the notepads and stuff like that, but he could never replace me. And when I think of The Secret of NIMH when Mrs. Brisby lost her husband, I think of my dad though. Yeah, it's not the same thing. I mean, I'm not talking about incest. Ew. I'm talking about how much this movie really uplifted me in a lot of ways though. There are times where even when I started watching The Secret of NIMH, while it did help me through most of my life though, well, not most of my life, but most of my time when I had my relationship with my first boyfriend, I still think there was something else though. But when I started watching it for myself more and more, I started realizing something else. The Secret of NIMH really helped me. A lot more than I think though. Again, go back to what I said. If there's one movie that anyone could tell you how much they love, and in this case they actually still enjoy watching in spite of all that, I wouldn't have it either way though. Because everyone has a favorite movie out there. Whether it's live action, whether it's animated, or maybe it's something that you could say could be a project of yours though. But other than that though, I have to say what uplifted me for The Secret of NIMH is how much it really inspired me to say that you can still unlock any door if you only have the key. And that's the thing about this movie. It really uplifted me that way though. Now I know I'm still broken as fuck still, but even beyond that, it still had my favorite mother character out there, Mrs. Brisby. Mrs. Brisby is a mother that I think we can all agree we wish there were more of. Yeah, she's timid. Yes, she cowers at times. Yes, she struggles. But those things become an accomplishment for how much she's grown over that time. And to be honest, I wouldn't have it either way though. While I would say The Secret of NIMH is probably going to be everybody's favorite movie out there, for all I can tell though, it's still a movie that still stays true in my heart. I still love this movie. Even when they sing the song Flying Dreams, both the lullaby version and the end credits version still caught my attention though. Even Jerry Goldsmith did so. Anyone who's a fan of these here musicals though could already tell this is not a musical. Although, yeah, I'm a fan of musicals myself, don't get me wrong, but even beyond that though, I still have to say it really caught my attention when listening to those two versions of it though. The lullaby version was mostly played when Mrs. Brisby was giving medicine to Timothy, but the end credits version was done by a singer you may be familiar with, Paul Williams. Yes, that Paul Williams. And honestly, I don't think there was any way I could have done it without anything else though. My heart does go out to this movie in particular though. But the sad thing is though, I know I keep going after sad note, but this does go someplace, so hear me out. When The Secret of NIMH was getting released, it was 1982. Obviously, I wasn't born that time. I was born in 1999. But one thing that does stick with me to this day would have to be how the movie had to have one final role to the actress who played someone in here. In this case, Elizabeth Hart. Yeah, you're probably wondering why I never say Mrs. Brisby's first name of anything. Well, that's because both in the book and the film never gave her a first name. And Elizabeth Hartman, they dedicated Elizabeth to Mrs. Brisby in honor for her memory, though. Sadly, this is really what I have to say about her memory, because this is the second time we've had an animated movie where some actress died, though. Yeah, Elizabeth Hartman, and yeah, this is gonna be disturbing, so hold on for a sec. I hope it doesn't scare you guys, because it did scare me, but if it does, I do take blame for it, though. See, in case you guys don't know, Elizabeth Hartman went through depression, and during that time, though, when doing Mrs. Brisby, this was 5 years prior from her death. So in 1987, she committed suicide by jumping off a building at the third story floor building, though. And yeah, this is what tragically killed her, though. Seriously, what's with these people thinking that suicide is the thing you should be doing, though? I know it's hard to go through depression. I go through depression, but even I'll admit that suicide is still not a good thing to do, though. And what's more, doesn't really affect already, though. The second time, that's the reason why I say this the second time I've heard something like this, is because in Gay Paris, a very forgotten animated movie that I don't know if I'll get to, but has Judy Garland in it, and she committed suicide by doing a drug overdose in her mother's bathroom. And that movie, Gay Paris, was her last film anyways, though. But I don't want to end on a sour note like that. I'm just saying, no, that's what I come across instead, though. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that The Secret of NIMH is still a pretty amazing movie. Despite most of the actors dead, and some of them are moving on to other things, and some of them may have had not that many roles to speak of, though, I still think this movie is still worth recommending. If you haven't seen it already, it is on YouTube for free, for as long as it takes there, no less. But there's also the fact that your movie is really one of those movies that is on Pluto TV. I watch Pluto TV on occasion, so you don't have to worry, though. But other than that, this movie is not that hard to find if you look hard enough, though. If you haven't seen it yourself, well, what the hell are you doing? Go ahead and watch it. Other than that, though, I really hope to do another video, though, as soon as I can. I want to do a live stream with my Flamingo's writings, because I want you guys to see how I write, though. But if I don't, then my next video will come out in June on Father's Day, and it's a follow-up to another anime from my Jose list, so be aware for that, I guess, though. But until then, and when I talk about Usagi Drop, it's gonna be both the anime and the the manga. Yeah. But anyways, I guess there's no other choice but to say thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate all you guys for supporting me this far, and yeah, I thank you all so much for watching this video, and for sticking around me for this long, though. As I said before, and I'll say it again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay flamingo-tastic. See ya!